In biology, how do we differentiate between species? Different species look different. Colors, crests and ridges, paws and faces. Different species act differently, from mating rituals to nesting patterns to responses to crisis. There is the basic level of reproduction. Do different animals mate and produce viable offspring? No mating, different species. There can be broad similarities across a genus, a wider family. For example, primates range from gorillas to lemurs. And they do still have some features in common, like opposable thumbs. Their appearance and habitats and behaviors are radically different, and they do not mate. What if we applied that approach to the Jewish world today? Is there one Jewish people? Are we one species, or maybe several within a Jewish genus? Our visual cues, the clothes we wear, the ritual garb some use or do not use, to beard or not to beard, to wig or not to wig, very different. The behavioral markers, where we live, how we celebrate, what we say and sing, how we interpret disaster as cosmic judgment or indifferent nature, very different. And do we mate with each other across extreme theological divides? It is only recently that conservative rabbis have been allowed to even attend intermarriages in their own family, let alone participate in the ceremony. While in Humanistic Judaism, we have celebrated these partnerships joyfully for over 60 years. A Jewish genus with similar features, okay. One Jewish people? Last Rosh Hashanah, exactly 1 year ago, on the Jewish calendar to the day, I talked about Jewish divisions. Here we go again. The state of the Jewish world is even worse than it was 12 months ago. We are a long way past the joke about the Jewish man on a desert island who builds 2 synagogues, one he attends and the other he won't set foot in. We are long past 2 Jews and 3 opinions. The fault lines are deep and growing wider. Some of those lines have been produced by the latest crises of Netanyahu and October 7th and the war in Gaza and anti-Semitism and our own security. Some of them were always there, and they have been made more clear and wider because of the stress, like a hairline crack in glass that creeps wider and wider until suddenly it jumps and threatens to shatter. Consider the ways we were divided even before October 7th and its aftermath. Think of geography. 18 million people in the world identify as Jewish or as partly Jewish or have at least one Jewish parent. 7.5 million are in Israel, 8 million in the United States, just under 2 million in Europe, 500,000 in Canada, another 500,000 in Latin America, and the rest scattered around the globe, except for the Muslim world, from which they were driven out decades ago. Our daily languages are different, our cultural contexts are different, political experiences are different, both between countries and within countries. Being Jewish in New York or Los Angeles is different from being Jewish in Detroit or Chicago. Even being Jewish in Highland Park is different from being Jewish in St. Charles. Species or genus? Think of culture. There are Ashkenazi Jews with roots in Central and Eastern Europe, Sephardi Jews with roots from Spain to Amsterdam and the Mediterranean and the Balkans, Mughrabi and Berber Jews from North Africa, Mizrahi Eastern Jews from the Arab and Persian Middle East, Central Asian Jews from the Stan countries, Indian and Ethiopian and Yemenite Jews. Each group has their own traditional language, their own recipes, their own clothing, their own art, music, professions. A Jew from one group might marry a Jew from another group. And then the in-laws can argue over which set of Passover dietary laws should apply to the couple, since those can differ between groups. Today, we also have the just Jews, people who are Jewish but who do not identify with any of those specific cultural groups. They may be of mixed Jewish heritage, or maybe the particular cultural markers of language and food and dress have simply faded. There are the Jewish ands, people with multiple heritages who identify with all of them, reflecting their family backgrounds on all sides. There are people who choose to become Jewish from other identities, what you might call the chosen. They are part of the Jewish family, but they do not have a particular cultural or ancestral branch to claim. And of course, there are the partners and spouses and adoptees and stepchildren of other heritage who are lovingly connected to Jewish people. These Jewish-adjacent people would add another 4 million to the possible American Jewish family population, and they do mate with certain Jews, but not others. Species or genus, one Jewish people or Jewish peoples. What about politics? There are liberal Jews and conservative Jews, libertarian Jews and socialist Jews, ultranationalist Jews and anti-nationalist Jews, parochial Jews and global cosmopolitan Jews. Jews on one end of the political spectrum are often convinced that the Jews on the other end of the spectrum are not just wrong, they are dangerous, they are traitors. To quote Natan Sharansky, they are un-Jews. For Universalist Jews, callous indifference to Palestinian suffering in the West Bank and Gaza is un-Jewish. For nationalist Jews, any empathy by any Jews for the enemy after Jewish tragedy and during intense conflict with Hezbollah in the north, Iran to the east, Yemen to the south, and anti-Zionism everywhere, that empathy for the enemy, that's un-Jewish. We have discussed before the ancient Jewish tradition of some Jews telling other Jews, you're doing Jewish wrong. That attitude today has been turned up to 11. Species or genus, one Jewish people or Jewish peoples. And don't forget, there are also religiously many ways to be Jewish and to do Jewish. Conservative, humanistic, reconstructionist, reform, renewal, modern Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox non-Hasidic, not to mention Jewish feminists, Jewish mystics and New Agers, orthoprax Jews who don't believe Orthodox Jewish dogma but live the lifestyle, and a million variations in between and around those boundaries. We have different standards for Jewish practice, different boundaries to become Jewish, different definitions of Judaism itself, even different ways to observe the Jewish New Year. When I first began working as a rabbinic intern, my wife's family had a tradition of Rosh Hashana dinners on the first night. And her grandmother couldn't understand why I wasn't available to attend the family Rosh Hashana dinner on Rosh Hashana evening. Because for that family, Rosh Hashana was services in the day, but the evening, the dinner was just as important as attending services. We had to explain that I couldn't be in two places at the same time. Now, we service-attending Jews heard the shofar last night, but Rosh Hashanah dinner Jews? Maybe not, unless they turned on the services on Zoom after dinner. And what about Hanukkah and Passover only Jews? Some Jews only observe those two holidays. They might never hear the shofar in a calendar year. Judaism or Judaisms? I was in a Hebrew Ulpan 25 years ago, and I tried to coin a new term. I wanted to talk about Judaisms. Yahaduyot in Hebrew would be the plural. And my Hebrew teacher insisted to me, there is no such word. There is only Yahadut, there is only Judaism, there is no plural. I wonder what she would say today. This is the Jewish reality today. Diversity. Some accepting pluralism and some imposing conformity. A recent survey of American Jews asked a very interesting question. How much do you have in common with other kinds of Jews? Is it a lot? Is it some? Is it a little or nothing in common? When they asked Orthodox Jews, how much do you have in common with Reform Jews? Only 9% said a lot in common. When they asked Reform Jews, how much do you have in common with Orthodox Jews? Only 9% said a lot, exactly the same small number. If you want to think positively, 41% of Orthodox Jews said they have some in common with Reform Jews, and 30% of Reform Jews have some in common with the Orthodox. That still means that 50% of each group feels they have little to nothing in common with each other. As humanistic Jews, consider how you might answer that question about both groups. How much in common with Reform Jews and how much in common with Orthodox Jews? To add to your pessimism, they also asked how much American Jews feel they have in common with Israeli Jews. For non-religious American Jews, just 4% said they had a lot in common with Israeli Jews, and 30% said they had some in common, meaning 2/3 said they had little or nothing in common. Even among religious American Jews, only 25% said they had a lot in common with Israeli Jews. Now, maybe the survey respondents were thinking about politics or Zionism, or maybe they were focused on Netanyahu governments that keep getting elected because they speak to a substantial proportion of Israeli Jews. Or maybe they assumed that Israeli Jew means ultra-Orthodox Jew. In fact, over 40% of Israeli Jews self-define as secular. Many are as secular as we are. Another third of Israeli Jews are traditional, Masorti, which roughly corresponds to Reform or Conservative Judaism here. Only 10% of Israeli Jews are ultra-Orthodox, who do not serve in the Israeli army and whose schools do not teach required subjects like math and science. Those subjects are learned by 90% of Israeli Jews, and over 90% of American Jews for that matter. But try searching Google Images for Israeli Jew and see what images you get. The 10% ultra-Orthodox, maybe the 15% modern Orthodox or national religious, but not pictures of the 75% non-Orthodox Israeli Jews. Israeli Jews and American Jews have more in common than we realize. And I should also point out that we can love and support those of our kin who we don't have a lot in common with. Those are different questions. But it does not change the feeling of separation or the real tensions and differences that do exist. In 2025, there are two new gulfs between Jews that we need to understand. There is the Jewish establishment versus the masses, and there is the bitter debate over how to respond to anti-Semitism. Decades ago, an organization was formed called the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. It was designed to coordinate among a variety of large Jewish institutions. There was at one point a meeting of smaller Jewish groups that weren't welcome to the major group conference, and they called themselves the Conference of Minor Jewish Organizations. But nobody listened to them. There are many ways that the organized Jewish community and its professional leadership do not understand the Jewish masses today. Today, large numbers of Jews have non-Jewish spouses and family. A much smaller proportion of Jewish communal professionals are intermarried. A 2010 survey of what you might call professional Jews suggested that less than 10% of them were themselves children of intermarriage, compared to millions of multi-heritage American Jews in the real world. 80% of professional Jews affiliate with a congregation. Only 1/3 of American Jews have even one synagogue member in their household, let alone a family household membership. Only half of American Jews donate to Jewish organizations, including synagogues, Jewish social service agencies, and advocacy groups like the Anti-Defamation League. Professional Jews are expected to donate. The best example of the gap is vocabulary. When I say the word federation, what do you think of? Is it a federation of Jewish social service agencies like the Council for Jewish Elderly, Jewish Vocational Service, Jewish food banks? Or does the word federation mean Star Trek? In Chicago, the name of our federation isn't even federation. It's called the Jewish United Fund. But if you say federation to those in the know, they know what you're talking about, and it's not Star Trek. When the leaders do not understand the people and the people do not understand the leaders, the community is in trouble. The other major divide we face this Rosh Hashanah is how to respond to the current rise in anti-Semitism. Even if we bracket the question of whether being pro-Palestinian is automatically anti-Semitic, before we argue over which slogans incite rather than inspire, it is a fact that Jews around the world, even in America, have experienced unquestionably anti-Semitic vandalism, online and in-person harassment, social and professional shunning, even physical violence. The nasty comments calling Jews pedophiles and the Church of Satan that Jeremy and I regularly delete from boosted Facebook posts, those are not just reactions to the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Jewish divide here is that we vehemently disagree on the causes and the solutions to this hatred. Is anti-Semitism worse coming from the political right or the political left? Your answer will determine who are your allies, who are the enemies, with whom can you build a coalition. Do we assume that the non-Jewish world in general hates Jews no matter what? If anti-Semitism is in the air and the water, then we should increase security and do whatever is in our own best interests, and to hell with what anyone says. Or is it reasonable to conclude that what the self-declared Jewish state does will affect how Jews are perceived and treated around the world, for good and for bad, and that sometimes critics of Israel, like any nation state, have a point? Most important, is the issue of anti-Semitism being used as a wedge, as a cover story for other agendas related to universities and immigration and the media. By putting the Jews in the middle of those issues, we land between political opponents, where we will inevitably lose. Sometimes these divisions over anti-Semitism mirror the split between the establishment and the masses, but not always. That old question, is it good for the Jews, is ever harder to answer. These divisions have been simmering for a long time and close to boiling through the Netanyahu years. The ripples of shockwaves from the tragedies of October 7th, 2023, and its aftermath have widened and deepened those cracks, and they may never be put together again. For some Jews, Zionism is foundational to their Judaism. Support for a Jewish state of Israel is non-negotiable. Even a critical support of a two-state solution Israel with compromises on borders and Jerusalem is bare minimum acceptable. For other Jews, any kind of Zionism is anathema to their Judaism, because they feel that all kinds of Zionism are complicit in the excesses of settler violence, militant religious nationalism, and indifference to Palestinian and Lebanese and Syrian casualties. For Jews in the middle, torn between right, between realities on the ground today and past wrongs and future demographics, they can be one Jew with many opinions. The division between Israel right and wrong and Israel always wrong, this third division is deeper than ever in the public square, and that has split the Jewish world too. What is to be done? No one has an easy answer. If and when the war in Gaza finally ends, we might hope that things will go back to what was before. I do not think that they will. The generational and political divide over support for Israel, engagement with Israel, or opposition to Israel, dealing with anti-Semitism, and the masses versus the elites, that is divided and has a divide that has many fathers. There is Netanyahu's courting of evangelical Christians and the Republican right. On the political left, there is the identification of Palestinians with racial oppression and Israel with white European colonialism. Never mind that over half of Israeli Jews' roots are in North Africa and the Middle East. Jews on the right and the left are troubled by some of their political bedfellows, but they are also convinced the other side is hopelessly naive and dangerously wrong. Maybe the time has come to finally cancel the slogan of being one Jewish people. Just as there are many Judaisms, there are many Jewish peoples. Genus, not species. Culture, geography, language, ideology, politics, experience, openness to or suspicion of the outside world, there are many constellations of the stars of David. We have ours. We may find common cause from time to time with others. What makes our species of Judaism authentic is the strength of our commitment, the meaning it provides in our lives. People sometimes ask me what other rabbis think of me as a humanistic rabbi, or what other Judaisms think about humanistic Jews. My honest answer is that most of the time, I do not care what they think about my rabbinate or our Judaism. If we lived our Jewish life by their values, it would not be our life. Our Judaism is meaningful to us, and that is enough. If they have a problem with it, that is their problem and not ours. Each Jewish constellation of stars of David has their own walls to keep out and doors to allow in. Different groups may not accept each other's members, just as different branches of a family may or may not accept those people. Are Jews divided? Yes, we are. As Marcia Falk put it in her revolutionary Book of Blessings, it is not our purpose to be divisive, but we are already of many minds. Silencing the concerns will not diminish them. It will not make them go away. Dare we ask these questions? Dare we not ask them? If not now, when? In other words, vive la différence. As Jews around the world and across time and space say to each other in this season, I wish you L'Shana Tova, a good and meaningful new year in your own unique